Hello and welcome to another GM Tips. GM Rick here, and we're going to discuss a little bit today on certain alignments. And I'm going to pick the alignments of neutral, and I'm going to deal with the planes of neutrality, or as Pathfinder calls them, the champions of balance. D&D calls them basically, it refers to them either as law, chaos, good, or evil. So, if you have a game that does not have alignment, then you may want to tune out on this. So any of the modern games that don't have it, or any of the RPGs that don't deal with alignment, this one may not be one for you guys. It's up to you. But I'm going to deal with alignments because I think it's important in both as a GM and as a player to understand alignments and what their intentions were in defining them. A lot of it is when you flesh out characters, you want to help people to understand where the deities fall and keeping up the tenets of those deities through life in order to have a after existence. And so that's really what they're looking at when they talk about said things. Now, when you look at these different things, I just want you to know that there are going to be a lot of different things when it comes to that. And we're going to talk about a little bit, I'm going to discuss a little bit the definitions of these both. Now, I think both D&D and Paizo both do a great job of discussing of alignments and fleshing them out. But I'm going to hit a little bit here on some of the text because I think it's important to understand the textual differences between an alignment. So let's start with lawful neutral. I'm going to do a little reading just because I think it's important when they talk about these. So here we go. Lawful neutral. Lawful neutral characters know that there are correct and incorrect ways to do things. This might be a almost subconscious sense of how the world works, a determination to make the world work that way, a matter of habit or neurosis, or a possible crutch that keeps the character moving forward instead of collapsing in a heap. Many characters who use organizations clearly define codes of behavior to guide their actions of how they're aligned. So basically, there are codes of conduct that rule a lawful neutral. They don't care about good or evil necessarily. They're not going to be pulled to either one or gravitate. They want order. They are an orderly type of character. So they say the neurosis, that this would be the person that orders their socks in a drawer in a certain color code or a certain size. This is a lawful. They are driven by orderliness. Lawful neutral characters vary widely. There are some zealous enforcers busily engaged in imposing their internal code on the outside world, while others channel their discipline inward and remain calm even in the face of disorder. Monk type. Not every lawful is going to automatically attack a disorderly chaotic, but they don't love chaos. They have to keep at least an internal order of things in order to do different types of things. And they give some great things. They share a little bit about some of the different types. So you got the executors, the judges, and the merchants. And all of these are very different in their codes of conducts and how they deal with things. So, neutrals. What are neutrals? Let's take a look at a pure neutral. At the crossroads of both the moral and ethical alignments, it's unsurprising that neutral characters should be arguably the most diverse in the ways they relate to their alignment. For some, their neutrality is a fervent held conviction, as any paladin's holy or zealous or demonic gluttony for destruction. For others, it is a result of a sublime indifference, unconscious or willful refusal to even entertain the question of law, chaos, good, or evil. Any character who thinks equally little, in any sense, of the claims of good, evil, law, and chaos on the mortal soul and on the world around them is drawn to the neutral alignment. Philosophies. The dominating philosophy of the neutral character largely depends on whether the individual has actively chosen neutrality as their way of life, or if they fell into this mentality by apathy of life, or ambivalence. In either way, the tendency of neutral characters to be either open to all walks of life or reject all principles wins them many friends and enemies. So they've got different ones. They've got the fatalists, the naturalists, and the agents of balance. And I love how they go through this because they give you a little bit difference on each one. Now, this is out of this book. And it was authored, let me give the author because I think it's always good to do that, by Matt Goodall, Ron Lundeen, Philip Minchin, Patrick Rennie, Jason Ridler, and David Schwartz all had a hand in this book. And I love these because, again, we think we understand alignment as players and GMs. But what they say is there's even different shades of each one. And you have to kind of know what's what. The chaotic neutral, the most misunderstood. And I'm going to lay that out there. Outside of chaotic good, it is one of the most misunderstood alignments, I think, on the face of the earth. Chaotic neutral characters are a widely divergent bunch. Hold this in mind real quick. For some, chaos is a principle upon which they fight. Others see it as an essential quality for their lifestyles. And there are those who hold chaos as water in which they swim. Whether chaotic neutral individuals view chaos as simply the absence of law or appreciate it for that reason, or see chaos as a fundamental nature of reality, characters drawn to the raw, untrammeled dynamism in any form may be attracted to this alignment. It is not just chaotic random, but they almost breathe it as the essence of creativity and change. They're about change. So some different philosophies. They got the impulsives, the rebels, and the saboteurs. But let's look at the philosophy a little bit. Finding a consistent philosophy among chaotic neutral individuals is nearly impossible. That's a good thing. No chaotic neutral is exactly the same. Some break every law they can on principle because, hey, laws are not meant to be in life. It's meant to be creative. Those are your chaotic randoms, as a lot of GMs call them. But there's others. Others point out that this is just as predictable and boring and slavish following the same laws. So by breaking the laws or following the laws, you're the same. If you go out of your way to break them, you're being just the same and enslaved in the same way. The following examples showcase some of these ones. So you got the impulsive. They're quick to act. They're decisive when they discover a feasible plan of action. They look for enjoyable ways to achieve their goals with what resources you have on hand currently. Sometimes struggle to pass up the surprising act for the successful but predictable one. So sometimes they're predictable, sometimes they're not, depending on the deal. The rebels may or may not have or need a vision of what should replace what you're destroying. They just love to break everything. Resent those who dare to try to hold authority over them. Can't stop fighting even when you probably should. Now see, this is the most used. The rebel is the most used of the chaotic neutral. And I think everybody ascribes that as chaotic neutral. But the impulsive is another flaw. While the saboteurs are another. Look for ways to cripple or break the system. Care less about the show than the result. Take pride in your foe's inability to catch you. They are so unique, each one, and hold different philosophies. Why is that important to understand? Because when you look at these alignments, they are never predictable. The champions of balance each are different. So, just like I did with the chaotics, let's look at the lawfuls a little bit. And I think, again, Paizo does a tremendous job of explaining this. Not that D&D didn't. 3.5 did. Wizards took a lot of time into the alignment system. 5e, it's not as much hit on, but it's still there. And it's from 3.5 in most cases. Now, let's look at the lawful neutrals in different types. What are the executors? They respect and seek to serve those who give clear and unambiguous orders. They view society in terms of machine-like or insect-like efficiency, where everyone plays a predefined role. Those are where the modrones of Mechanus are very much like these executors. Axis is a little different in Pathfinder, which is Pathfinder's version of the lawful neutral realm. They view society in, so resist questioning those in authority unless given evidence that they betray your trust. So, We just mechanically follow the laws and do our part. We are a part of the machine, and we do the machine's efficiency. We're looking at efficiency on these things. Let's look at the judges. Weigh all data before you, sifting out key details. So they're the ones that try to, per the laws, weigh everything. So like a judicial judge. Consider your personal authority to be representative of the greater one. So they are the judge, jury, and executor. Well, yeah, different than the executor in here, but they're and they resist revisiting past decisions. Once a decision has been rendered, it is that decision. So they don't have the creativity of a chaotic to go back and look at every different angle. They hit it all at once, and that is the law and the ruling. The mechanists, they look at the big picture while also seeking to understand the precise details of it. They recognize that small changes in the right places can transform outcomes. So they're open to a little bit of change now and then. They are flexible in their tactics, but fixed in the overall goal. How you get to the goal doesn't matter necessarily. We can adapt, but the goal is priority. Tend to think of others in terms of their functions and interactions. So they're about functionality. They're about goals. They are about set patterns in a society and working through things. Each one has a little different taste on it. So you can be flexible in your alignments. And I think this is where people get caught up in the alignment. They see it one way. Alignments are not one way. There are multiple ways to reach the whole. And so that's why, so those were the lawful neutrals I gave you. You have the chaotic neutrals and the lawful neutrals. So let's look at the neutrals, because I think these are important to understand in these type of things. All right, so now on those, you've got the agents of balance. They seek out outsiders and other strongly aligned forces and neutralize them. They are not about outsiders coming in and meddling in the order of the prime material plane. They strenuously resist any infringement on your soul and see your fate as your own and not another's to manipulate or control. This is a true neutral here. This is part of the agents of balance. They probably have a number of enemies, mortal and immortal, because they weed out those who would mess around with the material world and their lives. Are more likely than others to become an envoy of balance. So to someone like Pharasma in the Galarian realms, that was a part of the Galarian Pathfinder Paizo system. Pharasma is a judge and an arbiter of how you live your life and does not like interference towards that and will work against that. They see like undeath and corruption as an interferer with life's cycle. They're about the cycle of life and not being interfered with. So these are the agents of balance. The fatalists, they're resigned to eventually dying, but plan to enjoy their life while it lasts. Live life to the fullest. But don't hurt someone in the process or necessarily break the rules, just live it to the fullest. Keep going forward because it's what you know and it's the only real option you have in life. Maybe grimly stoic, wearily carefree, and some bitter combination of the two. They're nihilists almost. Well, not nihilists, because nihilists is different. They're trying to bring about their own destruction. They're just understanding that life has its cycle from beginning to end. Enjoy it while it lasts, and then it's over. Naturalists. They place a high premium on personal strength and self-preservation. They're not about destroying themselves while enjoying life. They know that finding like-minded companions is the surest way to survive in a harsh and unforgiving world, so they seek out other neutrals to hang with. They resist becoming invested in the external affairs that don't affect your immediate survival and your allies. So they're not worried about the long-term goals of a kingdom or a king or a god or goddess. They're looking at the moment and what affects them at that moment. And they seek to protect the natural world that inspires you so. So they often become druids and they become like the Greenway. They want to protect this world they live in because it brings them so much joy at the moment. It brings them so much life and colorfulness. You see how different neutrals are, folks? And sometimes we get caught up in alignments and say, well, it doesn't allow us flexibility. Bullpucky. It does. It allows a lot of flexibility. But there are certain things. You've got to understand it's a personality type. It's a code. It's an ethos. So I think the neutrals embody it much more than sometimes the goods and the neutrals, who lean heavily towards two different factors. The neutrals don't have that. They have the one factor. It's either law or chaos or absolute balance in life. And that balance can be looked at different ways, as can the lawfuls, as can the chaotics. And you don't have to just accept it being one way or the other. Now, if you look at it, the chaotics are looked at very differently. So look at an example from, again, and I'm leaning on Paizo, but you can look at also with Wizards. Wizards has a wheel of cosmology that they look at, okay? And in that wheel of cosmology, for chaotic neutral, you've got limbo. And limbo and the maelstrom are a little bit different. Limbo is kind of that ever-changing in-between area that is kind of formless, whereas the maelstrom is different. The maelstrom takes form for a while, but then changes later. So the details you remember 2 days ago may not be the same. Subtle changes and changes are always going on, and it's always shifting throughout. So the maelstrom and limbo are two different ways of looking at chaotic neutral. So D&D's side of looking at it and Pathfinders are very uniquely different in this, where everybody says, well, it's kind of the same old thing. No, it's not. It's the philosophies going into each. Okay? Now, you also have Pandemonium, which Pandemonium is kind of a chaotic neutral. So in the cosmology, where there is one with Paizo, okay, because Paizo for the chaotic neutrals has the maelstrom. You've got Pandemonium, Limbo, and Isgard, that are all part of the cosmology wheel of chaotic neutral with leaning a little bit good or evil in D&D. Where Pathfinder has the maelstrom. See, it's a little different wheel of cosmology. And if you're familiar with the one, you're kind of familiar a little bit with the others. They vary and differ. So it can lean towards the boneyard or hell or the abyss that's behind it. Because if you notice, the abyss is behind that for the evil. Where on the other side of it, on the good side, for Paizo is Elysium. So it's a different type of touching of each other on these planes and philosophies. Whereas the lawful neutral, they pick mechanics. Remember where I said the mechanical way of society, that's with the executor? That's how D&D sees lawful neutral. Whereas access is seen with Paizo. And access is different. Access even has, if you take a look at the plane of access, so I'm going to go to access real quick. Because I think it's important to understand these outer spheres. So there's Abaddon, the Abyss, where's access? There's access. Access is seen as a city with rings, concentric rings. And different rings are different things. In some cases you have gods of law there, but you also have Pharasma and the Spire. So Pharasma and the Spire, the Judge's Spire, is in 7. Where is 7? It's in here. But Pharasma's Spire is included as part of this touching of access. So they're almost touching each other. And look at what's there. That's the maelstrom, touching access. So even the maelstrom tries to incur on access and access on the maelstrom. They're in constant war with each other. And there's other places incurring and touching each other. And I love that because Paizo's or D&D's wheel to me is a little more set in some rigidity. Paizo took a little more creative role on it. It depends on which way you want to look at these alignments, but please look at them very differently. Just because you play a lawful neutral doesn't mean that you have to be this stick in the mud. It must be done this way, and you must do this role in life. Perfect example. They have a god or a goddess in Pathfinder in Golarion in that setting. That's about inner balance. That's Irori. That's the inmost balance. Remember the third one I talked about? Where they know the world around them is going to be ever-changing. So trying to rigidize that and make it all work doesn't always work for them. But they do have control of themselves and balance of themselves. And so long as they keep their own inner world balanced, they're good. They can deal with some of the chaos around them. In fact, they can even relate to a chaotic neutral and not go nutty and fruitcake with them. Because as long as that chaotic neutral doesn't try to change their inner philosophies and their inner laws and ordering of themselves, they don't care. Now, some things will quirk them and tick them a little bit. It's like that tick in your eye that you get when you see somebody doing something that you know just annoys the living crap out of you. That's a lawful neutral inner to the chaotic neutral going out and having fun at everybody's expense sometimes, or doing things more creatively all the time. No day is the same. Or a neutral, where they say, you know what, I'm just neutral at life. I just enjoy the here and the now. So they're all a little different, but they can all get along with each other because they're all about the balance. And so keep this in mind, that there's widely differences when you run these things. So beings from these planes are going to be different. Axiomites are going to be different than modrones. Modrones are more like some of the lawful mechanicals that are there. And they have them in Pathfinder, too. They're just different than the modrones are. Modrones are about perfect geometrical shapes and interactivity of the world. So, yeah, I'm bringing back what I know of the two. So, again, this is about 22 minutes on the philosophy. I know I've gone a little bit on it, and I'm sorry it took a little bit. Rick M, the GM, with capital R, capital M, capital T, capital GM, and no K in Rick. Or at Twitter, or RICMOH45 at Gmail. And we can discuss this even more. But remember, as a GM and as a player, there's different ways you can look at this. And when you run these, keep these things in mind. All right? Thanks and have a great week again.